Welcome once again to another edition of Good Books. I'm your host this week, Dr. John Cook, and with me today is Dave Shields. And this book is really interesting to me in particular. With Brad Brown, Dave Shields wrote a book called Term Limits, an Evolutionary Fix for Marriage. Dave, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you very much, John.
You know, in your introduction, you talk about how your marriage shattered your life, but tell us a little bit about your life outside of this book.
Well, let me say my marriage didn't shatter my life. It was my divorce that shattered my life.
That's what I meant. Sorry, your marriage collapsed. It shattered.
That's right. My life outside of this book, I'm an author, and I've written a number of books about, I've written some fictional books. I actually am fairly well known in the arena of professional cycling because I have some books that have done really well there, some novels, and then some biographies on some cyclists.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, this is a very readable book, and one of the things I noticed was the way y'all used different size fonts and different colors to emphasize and highlight key points. It made it so much easier for me to read and draw the key points out of it. So I think
in the case of this book, we really it's a subject for a lot of people. They look at it and they go, "Oh boy, it's heavy and ugly," and we wanted to make it as light as we could, and make it engaging. And input has. The response so far has told us that we succeeded, at least on that level.
Yeah. Now, this book is developed kind of as a problem, solution, and benefits of the solution, and I want to go through it in that order, but I've got to start with the place that I wrote down, oh my gosh, this is me, because I think y'all got into a lot of people's heads. There was a place in the book about the middle where you talked about a friend who'd been dating this girl for 2 years, and he was reluctant about even getting engaged. He didn't want to join the sad crowd of all those people whose promising marriages had failed. After all, he said, maybe our fantastic swinging from the chandelier sex will become a thing of the past the day we get married. We have fun now, so why ruin that? And I just thought, gosh, I could have said that.
The reason there's so many people that could say that, because marriage really, truly has failed. There are people out there that have been fortunate to have good marriages, and I applaud them. But there's way too many people that have gone through shattering experiences like it sounds like you maybe have, and I certainly have. And it makes it difficult to trust again, to think, do I want to put myself in that vulnerable of a position again?
Mm-hmm. This started off great at the beginning because we drew on the fairy tales of marriage a little bit, and married to the prince and living happily ever after, and then the lady wakes up and, oh my gosh, reality sets in. I think part of what happens in all fairy tales, and gosh, most romantic movies too, is they take you to the altar, and then they all lived happily ever after is what's after that.
Correct. Yeah, let me say that this book is a real interesting experience for me because the ideas in this book were not my ideas. I was going through a tragic experience that was really just knocking me left and right, and ended up talking with Brad Brown, and he listened to what I had gone through, and then he said, well, when you're ready for the solution, let me know. And of course I was curious. And then he laid this stuff out, and initially, most people, they're just kind of appalled at the solution, like the idea of a fixed-term marriage just doesn't make any sense. But once you really look at what that would mean, the repercussions of it, I've become a firm believer that it would result in much stronger and much longer marriages.
Mm-hmm. And that is the upshot about how this could really improve things. But let's start with the evolutionary pressure. You guys talk about how today's environment is drastically different from a generation ago. People still cling to the hope that they can create a stable marriage. But everything else in the world has evolved, and marriage sort of hasn't.
It's absolutely true. You look at you can think back several generations ago, back to our grandparents or great-grandparents' generation. They lived in a much, much simpler time. They lived in a time where women had a role and men had a role. That time is long gone, and nobody's asking to have that time back. But under this new set of conditions, the institution, as they set it up, just does not work. It simply does not work the same, and we've got to take a serious look at why it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And as you take a look at that, you start to realize marriage is the only contract that has for one, it's the only contract that you're only allowed to enter for life. There's only two ways out, either death or divorce. It's the only contract that becomes invalid once one party of the other dissolves it because of this concept called no-fault divorce. So it's for life, yet it can be dissolved at a moment's notice. There's no other contract like that. As a result, it's put marriage on shaky ground. And even people in stable marriages, they don't understand this. I thought that I was in a stable marriage. I learned, because of no-fault divorce, there is no stability whatsoever. The moment the other person decides they don't want to do this, it's chaos.
And that's one of the early points, that a marriage is not about one person being happy. They both have to be happy, and it's the building block of society. And yet, you have some interesting facts in there. 75% of women applying for welfare do so because of disrupted marriage. Broken families earn 42% less than intact families. Children of divorce experience lower levels of educational achievement. Now, it's grown to 354% increase in children from broken families. $40 billion paid out annually in spousal support. 50% of all first marriages end in divorce. It's depressing to read, but it's the reality of our time.
It's one of the shows that the average family going through divorce, the impact upon them is much greater than families that went through the Great Depression. We think of the Great Depression as this terrible time, that for us to go through, and we would never want to go through it. People are going through it in a greater level every single day as a result of this failed institution.
Mm-hmm. And with this rise in divorce rates, there's a lot of things that get harmed, not just the economy, not just the children. But the biggest point, I guess, is that there's not any of these statistics that y'all have cited that would support the theory that marriage is a healthy institution.
I literally have, in every conversation I've had, and in all the research we've done, we have not found any research. There's nobody claiming that marriage is, these people that claim my individual marriage works, I'm grateful for my marriage, different things like that. But there's no statistics that are saying that marriage is on the rise, that it's healthy. It's exactly the opposite. It's even though the divorce rates, they rose dramatically and then they quit rising, so you could say, well, divorce rate's not rising as rapidly as it once was. Well, neither is the marriage rate. Lots of people are in the same boat that you are, where they're saying, I'm just not going to get married again. So that has a big impact on preventing divorce.
Mm-hmm. The 10 problems that cause divorce are no surprise, but I don't think people think about it very much. And the number one, of course, is communication, which this proposed idea, the term limits idea, is really all about communication and being honest. So the two top reasons for divorce are communication and cheating and lies, and this provides some interesting solutions for that.
Exactly right. In this scenario, I don't know if we're ready to get into kind of some of the ideas, but I'll just touch on them here really quickly, at least on the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
In a normal contract, in any other contract you sign, let's say it's the contract you sign with your cell phone provider, they tell you exactly what they are going to deliver to you, what they're required to deliver to you. And you agree to deliver exact specifics to them. Now, they could over-deliver and you could over-deliver. Most people don't want to over-deliver on their bill, but they could. But if you deliver below those minimums, there are remedies in the contract that it will terminate everything else. Marriage is literally the only contract that's not like that. Nobody signs any other contract where they say, okay, we're together now. We don't really know what we want. We don't really know where we're going. So one of the key proposals is, let's write down what is it that I need from this marriage. Why did I choose to get involved with you? What am I going to bring to you, and what am I agreeing to give to you in return? That level of communication takes a relationship to the next level.
And that's part of the beauty of the problems you set forth, too. I mean, these things like communication, cheating and lies, money, religion, sex, society, midlife crisis, addictions, things like that, they're not surprising or earth-shattering, as you say, but nobody does anything preemptively to address them, and yet we're willing to say, I do, to forsaking all others till death us do part.
Exactly right. We get to this point where the marriage falls apart, and we wonder why. how did we miss the fact that, how did we not know that there was a specific thing that our partner expected us to deliver to them during our marriage, but they never told us. We never knew, and the marriage fell apart as a result.
Mm-hmm.
And as silly as that might sound, it happens again and again and again.
And the way society dealt with that was sort of turning things on its head when we sanctified divorce. You mentioned no-fault divorce started in California, and then every other state followed suit.
After equal rights passed and got changed the playing field everywhere. One of the things that happened as a result of equal rights obviously is a very good thing, but it made women more independent. Women who maybe previously in the grandparents' generation, they might have been in a bad marriage, but they couldn't do anything about it because economically they were beholden to their spouse. They had no way could they just walk away and say, okay, I'm going to go try to live my own life. Mm-hmm. Well, because of equal rights, women started being empowered to do that. And when women started doing that, men started also saying, well, geez, I can walk away too. And the courts were flooded with divorces. They were flooded so badly that it just completely seized them up. So the solution they came up with was not to come up with some way to settle divorces. It was to say, because at the time, believe it or not, people were literally doing things to ensure that their marriage would fail, like they were going out and cheating on their spouse publicly in order so that they could get a divorce. And they were saying, well, this is no good. So that's why they came up with no-fault divorce. They said, let's not make people go out and create a reason for their divorce. Let's just say they can get divorced. Mm-hmm. But obviously, it had repercussions that they didn't imagine.
Mm-hmm. The notion of a contract is something people probably would at first look would be taken aback, because we think of prenuptial agreements, and more often than not, a prenup is just laying the groundwork for a coming divorce like you expect it to happen. And this is not that kind of contract.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's based, parts of the idea of a term limits contract are absolutely based on groundwork that was laid by putting prenuptials in place. But there's a massive difference between a prenuptial agreement and a term limits contract. The way that if you read the book and you understand how we put it all together, as unromantic as it might sound at first blush to hear, hey, we've got to have a contract that really defines what we're going to give to one another, it's actually can be highly romantic. It can be highly connective to have these high-level discussions about what are my goals in life? What can I bring to the relationship that's going to make your life better? How can the two of us as a team be better than we could be as one? What can we do to a strong and solid family? All of these things are very, very powerful concepts that are getting passed by.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple of notes in here that I want to make sure our listeners hear, because when they hear the title of this book, they might think it's about not getting married for life. But even though you concede that not every marriage ought to survive and not everyone should get married, you guys believe in marriage, and this is something to make it stronger, and we need to make sure that people understand that.
Yeah, I think that you're hitting there on one of the biggest key points. And it's probably one of the biggest stumbling blocks for us in terms of promoting the book. People hear the idea of the book and they say, well, geez, these are clearly some guys that, they want to go have a fling with one woman and then end that contract and go with some other woman. It's all about sex or something. Mm-hmm. Once you really take a look at the concepts, though, and how they're laid out, I think that you recognize that if you've got two parties that are delivering to one another and actually over-delivering to one another, what will happen as we near the expiration of that contract? Well, I'm going to recognize, geez, I got a good thing going with this lady. I got lucky. She's good. She's honest. She's somebody that I want to have a continuing relationship with. So I will try to over-deliver because I want to make sure that she will sign me up for renewal. And if we renew, what are we going to do? We're going to do another honeymoon. It's a whole lot better than the alternatives of the way at one point in the book we kind of laid out the structure of the traditional marriage and showed the difference of this plan with consistent renewal. once people grasp that, they really get excited about this as a concept and a way to strengthen their lives and their marriages.
Yeah, the flow chart that you have, comparison of today's life marriage versus the term limits marriage. The important thing, I think, is that after mutual commitment comes the time when we sort of discover why we're going to get together, what we need from each other. A critical step in the process of setting up a term limits contract is to look at mutual needs and benefits and discuss points of contention. And what happens in the traditional marriages, that happens when you, after the honeymoon, when you start realizing that not everything is hunky-dory.
Yes, you start going to counseling. You're exactly right. The exact same process happens in both scenarios. But in our scenario, it happens before you sign on the dotted line. And in the traditional scenario, it happens once you decide, gee, this person's not delivering what I expected from the marriage.
Mm-hmm. And
it's pretty obvious
sorry.
one of those is going to work.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I wanted to note that the big difference is that you set these term limits, but you're looking at the possibility of renewing the contract at the end of that, and you actually talk about what promises need to be made and fulfilled upon in order for the contract to be renewed.
That's precisely right. I think this is actually a good time to say one thing. Even under the term limit scenario, not every marriage is going to survive. Some people are going to get to the renewal date and they're going to say, thanks, but no thanks. They're particularly going to say that if they've discovered that they're in a relationship with a dishonest person. If one of the two parties is dishonest, it doesn't matter what type of a marriage that what type of a contract you put in place, there are going to be problems because a strong marriage requires a really, really honest relationship. It requires the ability of each spouse to know what the other spouse is doing, what they're, not in an intrusive way, just I know that person has got my interests in mind. I know that they're not doing something behind my back that's compromising my family, my integrity, or something else. So any kind of a marriage where, if you entered an initial, 5-year term or something like that, and during that course of time you started to discover that this person had these honesty issues and that things weren't working the way that you had imagined they would, in a traditional marriage, that means you've got to go through a divorce. In this kind of a scenario, it means you've got to say, okay, I'm going to fulfill my contract, get to the end, or if there's breach of a contract, it will end earlier. But what you really deserve as an honest good person, is to be in a relationship with another honest, good person. There's a lot of them out there. It's just sometimes that people are not getting coupled up with the right person.
Mm-hmm. The idea of that it might end, the possibility that it might end. One of the things that I really like about this proposal of a term limits contract is you set forth that should this end, here's how we're going to deal with the property, the child custody, those things that usually people fight over with an attorney.
This is a major issue. You probably, I don't know whether you're aware or not, but the average divorce in America costs $15,000 per party, which means we're talking $30,000, and I'm just talking attorney fees only, $30,000 in attorney fees per divorce. There were 1.1 million divorces last year, so we're talking about a $30 billion yearly industry. Do you think that if you laid out in advance, should this relationship fail, here's how we'll divide things, do you think that would cost $30 billion for people to lay that out? I think it's pretty obvious. It would maybe cost at most a couple hundred per relationship, rather than tens of thousands per relationship.
Mm-hmm. And
so lawyers, it's gonna hurt the pocketbook of family lawyers if people accept this.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose that's where the resistance will come from, is all those lawyers and the money they're making.
Possibly.
But the general feeling in society that a lot of us have brought something up for me, that people may subconsciously feel that their partner's only being exciting for now to get them to sign on the dotted line, and that marriage would change all that. It reminded me of an Archie Bunker quote. He often said, "You stop running after you catch the bus." And some people seem to deal with marriage in that way.
Well, and you know what? I love that quote, and that's exactly the scenario here. Let's not catch the bus and become completely comfortable. There's no scenario where if you stop running in a marriage that you're going to have a stronger marriage than if you were to just continue to work towards, striving for this person. So let's set up a scenario where it makes sense to continue to deliver, to over-deliver, to make their lives positive, to put them in a position where they're going to say, "Man, my life is just awesome because you're in it, and I want you to stay in it." Mm-hmm. If you do that, they're going to want to renew, and the two of you are going to, want to celebrate these renewals with honeymoons. It's human nature.
Mm-hmm. Some great points about getting to the contract, about writing things down. You mentioned that a healthy sex life is important for your general health, mentally and physically, and that there are things that people like and things that people don't like. And it really doesn't matter what they agree to as long as they agree to the same thing, whether it's sex and flowers on holidays or fidelity or taking care of the kids and the pets and how you deal with things and whether you have to have a trip to Paris or Tahiti. It really doesn't matter. What matters is getting it in writing and agreeing on it.
You're absolutely right. It doesn't even matter. You could say, I want to have an open marriage. I mean, if the two parties are willing to agree to that and they're willing to say, yeah, these are the rules of our marriage. Who am I to say that they can't do that or have a good relationship that way? Mm-hmm. Of course they can. If they can have completely sets of values that are totally contrary to what I would think of as values. Yet, as long as they're in agreement and they're treating each other with respect and honesty throughout the process, they could end up with a very, very strong relationship in marriage.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I want to ask about, because I teach at a college and not everyone has great writing skills. You talk about the power of putting things down on paper because it's concrete and easy to communicate and helps clarify thinking. What about people that are not that adept at expressing themselves, especially in writing? Do they need to get some kind of help for that?
You're right that a lot of people have a challenging time putting words down. But when they quit worrying about composition and they just start worrying about reality, most people discover that I can at least coalesce my thoughts down into basics. Here's what I want. It only has to be, it might be 3 words. I want affection. I want love. I want whatever. It could be real simple things. And to help with this process, we created a website which is termlimitsmarriage.com. You can literally go on there and sign up for free, and it gives you a question, and you just answer basic questions. Some of them are just multiple choice, where you just select, whatever answer, and then it merges these answers between 2 partners to facilitate the discussion. Mm-hmm. Some of the time, people will look at it and they'll say, "Well, that's a funny question to ask." They answer it, and then they see the answers that their potential spouse had. And it generates discussion, and it causes them to realize, hey, here's an area that I didn't realize that we are not in agreement in. And let's figure out whether we can come to an agreement or whether this is going to be a deal breaker for us or whether there's some other kind of arrangement that we can make that, to work these things through.
The deal breaker thing resonated for me because I in my painful divorce, I had the reactive counseling, not the proactive counseling that Term Limits suggests before you get into the marriage. And at that counseling session one time, they asked, what is it that you absolutely cannot live with? Well, one of the side benefits of this is you confront the deal killer issues before you take your vows.
Absolutely right. That really, when I first heard the concepts that Brad was laying out, it took me a while to start to understand, wow, this is all working together in a very powerful way. As you start to see how these different, apply into your own life and see how these things might have affected your life and your relationship, many readers are saying, geez, this really is a good idea. The time has come to at least think about it. And maybe it's not right for everybody, and, that's just fine, too. Anybody who wants to enter a traditional marriage, there's nothing at all saying they can't do it. But why should we not have a system where people can enter this type of a marriage for those people that say, hey, this works better for me?
Mm-hmm. And a couple of other side benefits to share with the readers, and I'm going to move on to a very important chapter about misrepresentation. They might discover things about themselves that they never realized, and they might learn that they can make their partner feel loved through a simple gesture, and that doesn't get talked about. That gets sort of uncovered in living your life. But the chapter on stopping misrepresentation really hit home for me, because it's really the thing that should be a red alert to people, is when people are not representing themselves honestly.
Absolutely true. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but it really comes down to honesty. Seems like such a simple thing, particularly if you're an honest person. It just seems so simple and easy that, and it seems so straightforward and basic that you tell the truth to your partner. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, lots of people don't get told the truth. They're involved in a relationship with somebody who, for whatever reason, is manipulating the truth or making sure that, handling scenarios. That's a very exhausting position for the liar to be in, and a very compromised position for the person that's listening to the lies to be in.
Mm-hmm. And
so, we need to pay good attention, and we need to make sure that we're having honest interaction with whoever we're going to have a long-term relationship with.
And I'm sorry, I'm so excited about all this, and I want to get to as much of it as I can. If you're not ready to give your email and internet passwords to your mate, you're not ready for a term limits commitment. Wow. I just wrote wow on that page.
Wow is right. And, I honestly am not saying there that you have to give it to them. I'm saying if I am in a relationship with somebody and I would say to myself, I would be unwilling to give them my passwords, well, what exactly is it? Why do I want to hide from them? Or if they're unwilling to give it to me, I'm not telling anybody ask for the passwords. I'm just saying, if they won't give you the passwords, what does that mean? How can you have this high level, most powerful relationship in the world with somebody if you're literally saying, they've got the right to keep sections of their life from me or activities from me? You just simply can't. When you really think about it, you've got to be able to be totally honest with this person.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the benefits of going with term limits, say a 4 or 5 year contract. One of the things that you discuss is about how you're going to get reelected. What do you do to convince your mate to re-up the contract? It's kind of like running for political office.
If you use the tool on our website, not only will you ultimately have the contract that says, here's the really important things. These are the biggies that we've got to do. You'll also be looking at their answers to all of these other questions. You'll know the things that are a little bit important to them, the things that maybe change their life a little bit. And if you really love them, you may say, hey, guess what? I'm going to do something about that. I'm going to make their life better because they told me how to make their life better. That's the way to get reelected. Mm-hmm. That's the way, be the person that you would dream of being married to, and you will change their lives, and you experience tremendous love as a result of doing that.
Mm-hmm. The great thing about this is, number one, it revises our thinking a lot, and it winds up with two major points. One of them is imagining a marriage contract that was designed to strengthen and support good marriages, and the term limits contract is that. And it also helps to dissolve bad marriages. So it's very helpful in both ways. But I've got maybe half a minute where when we talk about kids and marriage, because that really, we haven't addressed that topic, and y'all spend a good deal of time at the end of the book about kids.
Yeah, well, obviously, kids are a huge issue. Now, this is probably the area that we get the most negative comment from people that say, geez, what you're doing is just going to tear down the institution of families. It's not that way at all. Number one, nothing at all would change from the current scenario where, if someone gets divorced, the kids go through all of these issues. There's all the custody and all those problems. Unfortunately, we haven't figured out a solution to those problems. Those would happen anyway. But what we're suggesting is, in your initial term, we think that it's a really, really good idea to agree, let's not bring kids into the equation during the initial term. Now, for some people, that might be a challenge. For people that don't have a problem with birth control, We certainly live in an era where you could make the decision, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that there are not kids involved in this first term. Wouldn't you agree that if you get through that first term and you both want to renew, that you would both be in a much better position to create a family and to bring kids into the world and all of those things? So ultimately, I think that it's a very good solution for children, but there's not much that can be done at this point about families that dissolve anyway.
We've been talking with Dave Shields, who co-authored a book with Brad Brown called Term Limits, An Evolutionary Fix for Marriage. And the website, again, is www.termlimitsmarriage.com, where you can see some tools there. I'm your host, Dr. John Cook. Thanks for listening.